The wheel of time turns and ages come and pass, leaving memories that become legend. Legend fades to myth, and even myth is long forgotten when the age that gave it birth comes again.
Welcome to Through the Glass Columns, a Wheel of Time read-along podcast. Each week, we will be reading, discussing, and digesting a small selection from Robert Jordan's fantasy opus. This quest is led by Tylor, a true Wheel of Time warrior.
I have all stories, ages that were and that will be. And I'll be joined by Greg, a complete novice to the Wheel of Time.
The Wheel of Time and the wheel of a man's life turn alike without pity or mercy.
Join us each week as we read the Wheel of Time in our own sweet time, traveling deeper and deeper through the glass columns.
But what does that even mean?
No. You don't get to find out yet.
Wait, Tylor, I know what that means now.
Yeah, no, you really don't.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Through the Glass Columns, your weekly Wheel of Time read-along podcast. I, of course, am your host, Tylor, who is really excited, because guess what, y'all? We just finished a book. And I am joined by Greg, who has been insisting that we read a lot in the past couple of weeks because he wanted to finish this book. Greg, how did this finale live up to your expectations, bearing in mind you can't say too much specifically about the second chapter yet?
I will just say, yay! Really, truly, thank you to Tylor. I have been pushing. We've been averaging like 2 a week. I think we've become the twice weekly read along podcast. So we're actually pretty far ahead of this. I posted on social media when I was reading yesterday, like I finished a book, and some of our fans might have noticed that and thought, oh no, I'm behind. But no. We're just working a little ahead and planning for summer vacation. So if Tylor's math is correct, you are listening to this on roughly the 30th of July or thereafter, if you're listening to it fresh. And so we hope that this means you're set for a good August. We're going to move on to another book after one more episode. And we also have the TV show episodes coming. But we'll save all that for later, because let's talk about the end of the book before we do all that.
Yes, we got some good stuff coming up this week, y'all. We talked the past 2 weeks. We kind of fell down on the place of the first conclusion with Elaine and Nynaeve was good, but we didn't really have kind of the hooks into that plot line we needed for it to really have a lot of emotional resonance. We really liked the Perrin plot line. Our only knock on it, I think, seemed to be that a lot of the things that happened felt kind of like we knew how they were going to go, and things kind of just went by the normal story. How would you put number 3 of our conclusions in that kind of framework? Was this surprising? Was it kind of in line with what you had in mind? And did it land at a character level, right? Because I think the one challenge, at least of this first of the 2 chapters, is that this could be a conclusion for a lot of characters, and it ends up being a conclusion for Rand.
Across these 2 chapters, I saw absolutely everything coming. There were no surprises, 0 surprises. No, of course not. And we'll keep it pretty vague because we know people do it one at a time. I think, I would say the first one was largely what I kind of expected, big meeting, big speech. And then the second was just totally unexpected and different than what I thought. And I already wrote down lots of movie comparisons I want to make, but I'll make those in due course when we get to those specifics. To the larger question about characters, I do think you're right. These served Rand way more than anybody with Rand. And yet I was pretty satisfied. I think it's just not Egwene, Moraine, or Lan's book. And, I think Lan is probably most due of those. He hasn't really had much to do in a couple books, but, we spent a lot of time with Egwene and Moraine recently, so it's okay if they're kind of just along for the ride on this one, in my opinion. How did you feel about it, especially coming back to it? You didn't have surprises here, but, you still had to survive with only Rand.
Yeah, I have always found this to be the book that kind of baffles me in terms of why I love it, right? I think there are other Wheel of Time books that have like bigger, more explosive conclusions. I think there are other Wheel of Time books that maybe spend a little more time on kind of the character moments that I care about. This is a very kind of action-y book, especially for Elaine and Nynaeve. But I love this book, and every time I get to the end, I am excited to get there, even though I am kind of left going like, okay, that was a lot of little climaxes, but no like one big moment that stands out as the thing that defines the book. So I really love the end of this book, but it's a little bit atypical in Wheel of Time land for me, right? Usually these are books that have a defining moment at the end, right? They get to the Eye of the World, or they battle the Shan, or they take the Stone of Tyr. And I'm not entirely sure that Rand tells some secrets to Aiel lives up to that same level, even as I absolutely adore these chapters. Any last thoughts before I go into what is probably an enormously long summary of chapter 57?
No, other than if we made viral videos of our content, and they would go viral, I'm just assuming, not just any videos. Conan O'Brien used to have a great bit where he'd have a celebrity on, and the celebrity would tell their personal secrets, and so it was always the celebrity name and then a voice going secret. So it'd be like William Shatner, secrets. So I'm picturing what follows in your next summary as Aiel, secrets.
That is really solid. I'm just a little bit younger than you, so when I hear secrets, I think of Homestar Runner and secret eating. Chapter 57, A Breaking in the Threefold Land. Rand rides in sweltering heat toward a mountain where he thinks there will be an end and a beginning. Rand has an honor guard of maidens who are following him around. There are at least 10 at all times. Avienda is avoiding trying to get the attention of the maidens because they see Rand as, and they have kind of devoted themselves to Rand because they see him as the first child of a maiden who has been known to them. And so they kind of see him as almost an honorary maiden of the spear. When this arrangement was initially made, we learned that Rand had to once again do the honor tradition with the kissing and the drinking, but this time it was not drinking of water. It was instead drinking of uskwi, aka whiskey, and he got extremely drunk. Avienda ignored him for a day or so after that. We learned that hundreds of Jindo and Tardad have been joining the group every day, and that they have now more people than are generally allowed at Alcair Dal, but Rand says that is the breaking of tradition that he brings. Eventually, they arrive at the camps outside of Alcair Dal, and they see that there are 5 camps, meaning that there are 4 groups plus the Shido, and now themselves making 6. They think that even the Shido should have more honor than this because they have also brought more people than they would ordinarily be allowed to, and Rand thinks that Couladin must be up to something to have left in the night, and so he isn't surprised by this. Lan, at this point, points out that a battle between the two groups would be messy, but says now is not the time for that. Moraine then talks to Rand, saying that she wants to come along to Alcair Dal, but she is apparently barred by customs, and the wise ones seem to support Rand in not bringing her along. But they also tell Rand that they need to be cautious because the Aiel cannot afford a mistake from him at this point. They also note that the peddlers are heading towards the camps and are going to be able to make an enormous amount of money. At this point, Egwene urges Rand to keep to himself for the most part and not create and basically he needs to not rely too much on his own counsel and also needs to start relying on Moraine and others. Moraine and Egwene at this point say that they are fighting for Rand, and Egwene says that he is pulling them all, and then Moraine actually urges Rand to take Lan along with him, but he denies this as well. He says that the Far Dares Mai carry his honor. As they head down towards Alcair Dal, Rand warns them to be on guard, and Mat asks to go, accidentally referencing his luck in the Old Tongue, and is eventually allowed to come along. As they make their way towards Alcair Dal, the Aiel begin playing pipes and singing about the battle and death, and Rand heads off with everyone watching him. Another one of the chiefs, Manduin, is surprised that Ruark broke custom, but he says he's heard the Karakarn will be revealed today, and Rand says that he must have heard prophecy. Mat then quotes the Old Tongue once again, and Rand has to restrain Ruark from taking on the Shido's provocation, but the Shido eventually part and allow them through. At this point, he sees the clan chiefs as well as Savannah and Couladin gathered, and Savannah is demanding that Couladin be given the right to speak, but Bale, one of the other clan chiefs, tells her that only one who has been to Rhuidean may speak here, and they are apparently all gathered for a great announcement, but according to Bale, it will not happen until all of the clan chiefs are gathered, so they should split for the day. At this point, everyone notices that Rand has entered, and Rand notes that Savannah looks extremely different from the other Aiel and seems to respond differently to many of the things that are happening. At this point, Rand is challenged why a wetlander is here, and Savannah says that if Rand is allowed to speak, then so can Couladin. At this point, Couladin strides forward, declaring himself to be the Karakarn and revealing 2 dragon tattoos that match Rand's. He begins declaring his plans to conquer the lands beyond the Dragon Wall and take all of their riches. Rand is clearly shocked that Couladin has done this, but he reveals his arms, causing the crowd to go silent. Savannah apparently didn't know that Couladin apparently didn't tell her that Rand had also been tattooed, and the silence is kind of overwhelming as Couladin tries to continue declaring his plans, but no one seems to be paying attention anymore. At this point, Couladin points out the fact that Rand is a wetlander, and Rand says that this actually aligns with prophecy, pointing out both the prophecy that he shall be raised by someone not of the blood, and also pointing out to his Aiel lineage. At this point, Couladin says the prophecy could have been changed in memory over time, and when he is challenged about whether or not he went into Rhuidean, he says that he went without permission, and he arrived at Alcair Dal with dawn, and therefore fulfills the prophecy. Rand then asks Couladin what he saw in Rhuidean, and Couladin refuses to speak of it, even when he is told that he can mention it in private. Rand then begins to prove that he has been to Rhuidean by telling the secrets of Rhuidean, including the fact that the Aiel used to follow the Way of the Leaf. Rand claims that Rhuarc must have told Rand, but no one believes that, especially after Couladin denies the truth of what Rand is saying. Rand reveals the full truth of the Way of the Leaf and that these people used to be the Tinkers, and at this point, Rhuarc says that this truth is too much for the Aiel. Only a third of the people who learn of it as clan chiefs survive, and now the truth will spread. Rand says that he brings change, and Savannah knows before Couladin does that all of the chiefs will declare Rand to be the Karakarn. At this point, Couladin attacks, beginning a battle among a number of the people around, but Rand channels, creating a storm and then rain, causing everyone to suddenly stop. At this point, a dome surrounds the group, and Lanfear is there, saying that he has ruined her plans, and she must know that he is here somewhere. Rand doesn't exactly know who she's talking about, but he says that he knew that she would follow and he set a trap. She says that she brought Asmodean to teach him, but now he is in Rhuidean, thinking there is something there that could be more valuable than having Rand as an ally. She tells Rand that he should join her with 2 great Sangreal and says that they could take over the world, but Rand creates an opening into a dark area, and Lanfear comments that he must be remembering things, but he steps through ready to battle Asmodean. Wow, that was a long summary. What did you pull out of this really kind of action, but also weirdly world-building dense chapter?
I said really, really smart things in my notes, but I did just want to note that, like, probably about a third of the way through, I just wrote the sentence, so many Aiel words. I guess that's not a sentence, but I do think that on the whole, it nicely balances those 2 things you just talked about, in that it feels climactic and like it's really about Rand's story, while also kind of stretching out and helping us appreciate this culture and this world a little bit more. I did say in reaction to your prompt at the start of show that I expected most things in this chapter, and that's not true at all. Did I expect the Couladin, the kind of the fake he who comes with the dawn play? I didn't. I thought it worked really well as a, like, dramatic scene in that kind of subversion of your expectations. It's not just Rand accepting the laurels and the crown, but really a clear challenge to it. Though I am glad it kind of all fell apart pretty quickly.
Yeah, I think that's the interesting thing about this chapter, is that it presents us with a really kind of fascinating challenge to Rand in the form of Couladin's kind of false claim of being Karakarn. But then the odd thing is that Rand diffuses it so quickly that what we're left with is obviously something that will be really meaningful for the Aiel long term. But in terms of what happened in this chapter, Couladin is there to stir up the pot and then immediately be diffused. And that's kind of an odd choice, right? This could have been the big action sequence with Couladin, and it very much isn't. I actually wanted to kind of jump to the beginning of the chapter because there are a lot of really small character moments. I feel like Lan and Moraine and Egwene and Matt and Ruark and all of these characters all get like 2 or 3 sentences to shine, but none of them obviously have a huge kind of plot role in this chapter. What was your take on the first maybe third of the chapter where there's just a million names dropped, but none of them really get too much of a spotlight shine on?
Amongst those that you listed, I was most interested in Matt. I really did not expect this book to end without kind of more about what happened to him through the glass columns coming out, and the fact that we leave that kind of totally to be determined, TBD,
Yeah.
is to me kind of the biggest surprise about this ending. Sorry if I guess I might technically be spoiling the next chapter for some people, or I'm spoiling what's not in it. So the fact that we just kind of get, I would say all those moments you just listed, they're just like confirmation that those people are there and that they're largely in the same place they were when we last saw them.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of kind of movement forward on any of those. I think it just is meant primarily to confirm all the tension that surrounds this big meeting and have a little bit of tension of who gets to go in, who doesn't get to go in.
Yeah, I thought that the one thing that really stood out to me is most of the characters feel like they are reacting to Rand, right? Like Moraine is seeing what his plan is and trying to be like, can you bring me? Can you bring Lan? But the one character who feels really proactive here is Egwene. She kind of approaches him and immediately starts giving him advice about how is he being too reserved? Is he trusting the Aiel too much? Is he not listening to Moraine? And she is just really direct about like, you need to do these things. It seems like things aren't going especially well for you, which of all the characters who got that mini spotlight, that was the only one that made me go like, oh, that's kind of a moment of growth for Egwene, right? She's seeing herself as kind of an advisor in a way that I think a couple of books ago she wouldn't have been willing to accept that role. She was the star of the story.
Well, and it was a moment where you realize Egwene has been leveling up and Rand is just too self-centered to
Yeah.
care, right? And that's a little bit of an unfair usage of self-centered because he is, but it's like, well, when you're the chosen one and have to balance all property, it's a
Yeah.
little understandable than just like, oh, I'm into my own stuff. But it's like she could have throughout this book been a powerful tool where she's communicating with the other parties. She's
Yeah.
in the Teleron Riode, and I just wanted one more time to prove this season that I had it in me.
Yeah, you got it.
That's the only one I do right, so I want to celebrate it. Um, and so I really felt like it was startling that like even here where it's like, okay, the climax is coming, she's a helper who is kind of just ignored and cast to the side, and that's too bad. And it also to me speaks to whereas early on in this series, I maybe thought the big plan was Egwene and Rand. It's very clearly not
Yeah.
anymore. There's no tension between them. There seems to be caring between them and love of a kind of familial type, not a romantic type.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And I really like kind of the way that Egwene has gone from potential romantic interest to characters who don't really want to be in the same room to her very clearly trying to reestablish that kind of friendly relationship, right? I think that evolution feels earned, and we're now at the point where it kind of makes sense. Those exes don't really treat each other like exes anymore. The next note that I had is normally I am not a big fan of songs and books. I feel like the lyrics just get clunky and throw me off. But the intercutting of the Aiel kind of very simple chant along with kind of Rand's internal monologue worked really well as kind of the way that he entered Alcair Dal. What did you think about kind of the use of song? Because I know I think you on a couple of times you've also mentioned you have a difficult time with like the Tolkien style. Here's some song lyrics in the middle of a chapter.
I'm bad because I studied poetry in grad school, and yeah, I almost always my eyes just skip over them. I don't think they're important, and I skip over them. This felt a little different because it was chanting and kind of as he approached it did keep my interest a little bit more. Again, nobody knows when we're recording, but maybe we just saw Star Wars do something kind of like this where we had chanting and kind of a ritual scene, and so I was kind of thinking of the placement of those characters in that same kind of way, and it works as like a rite, right? Rite. And it was cool staging. It was definitely, I also I told you I had my movie references lined up. This also felt very Dune, right?
Yeah.
Like because of the setting we're in and because we have a chosen one and actually a meeting of clans, like all of this would be straight out of Dune, and this does post date Dune. So I have
Yeah.
for once I have the arrangement in the right direction there. And I would say like a lot of this felt like it was pulling on those same ideas
Yeah.
and it would work. And I could picture those scenes from Dune Part 2. And it's like, yeah, this is kind of how big and grand this could feel like in this moment. So I was here for it.
I think this is kind of why I love this book the way I do, is because Dune is a book that I really wanted to love, and I love the world of it, and I love kind of the general shape of the story. I just don't think Frank Herbert is that good of a writer. And so for Robert Jordan to take all of those ideas and remix them in this kind of very interesting way and do it while, writing good action sequences instead of 10-page piles of dialogue where no one actually says anything, this is just a big old win for me. And I think that the Aiel culture is a big part of why it works, is so much of the plot side of this story feels very much like Rand is Paul Atreides and the lineup is way too easy. But the Aiel are so unique, even compared to like the Fremen, which would be the comparison point, that I think it sells me on all of this being fresh and new instead of just a rehash of that story that had been old by the time Robert Jordan did it, and certainly is now like 4 sets of movies later.
Avienda as Zendaya also works really well.
Yep.
So yeah, I think I agree with that. The thing I will give and I'm actually giving Dune the film credit for this, which is just a better. I mean, I agree with you. It's so much of a better experience.
Yeah.
Denis Villeneuve really adapted it quite well. Um, I thought, and as I understand my Dune lore, basically, Frank Herbert wanted to make you skeptical of Messiah figures and
Yeah.
failed. So then he had to write the third book to be like, no, really, like be skeptical of Messiah figures.
Yeah.
So to me, I think that the film version does better at like which way will Paul go than I think this is, right?
Yeah.
I even throughout all these steps where, could Rand be losing his mind? Could he be going dark? Could he be being manipulated? I think I just find myself always being like, nope, he's my good guy, he's my
Yeah.
boy. And that's not to say book 12 won't turn that on its head and make me feel like, oh gosh, what just happened? But at least at this point, I don't really have questions about Rand's motivations in the way I think the
Okay.
films have made Paul Atreides more complicated.
Yeah, no, I think that's exactly the right position on those two characters, right? Frank Herbert is interested in tearing down the Messiah narrative. Robert Jordan is interested in problematizing it, and those are two very different stories. I think the interesting thing that comes next to me is the introduction of a brand new character in the second to last chapter of this book who plays a shockingly large role. Savannah is the wife of Couladin's brother who died and is acting as clan chief, but also thinks that Couladin should be the next clan chief and wears clothes that are weird for an Aiel. That is the full description of this character we have. Did she land for you? Did you feel the oddness of having a new antagonist on page 900? What was your take on kind of this early section of the Alcair Dal Bull confrontation scene?
And I'll stretch it into the next section. I thought kind of her whole role here was just facilitating Coladin's gambit in this meeting, right? And it made me think a little bit of your favorite Star Wars movie, Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, where you have kind of Palpatine making moves to get the leadership challenged, and Padme getting duped into essentially doing so for him. And so this person, I guess that would make her the Masameda of this situation, right?
Yeah, that's a name I've heard.
the blue guy who, when Chancellor
The blue
Valorum,
guy. I got it.
and the Chancellor Valorum is speaking, and then they kind of say like, "Hold on, Chancellor, hold on," and it's like the real power speaks up, and he's in Sheev's pocket. Sheev is the Emperor's first name. I'll stop talking Star Wars for a minute. So I think because of that play, I didn't necessarily clock her as, wow, she'll be the antagonist next book. But certainly the fact that she escapes this book seemingly unharmed and ready for action, I think is significant. And we'll talk about the end of the book when we get to the end of the book, but it feels like everything that is happening in this chapter is just going to inform the next book. Not in an unsatisfying way, but I feel like we're in for an Aiel civil war in the next book.
So then we get to what to me is one of the most fascinating conclusions of this book, right? We've had two big action sequences, and here Robert Jordan says, no, 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 Couladin is going to get mad, and Rand is going to diffuse the situation by telling the truth about the past. And one, I really wish that was an effective way to win a debate, but two, I do think that this is a really kind of fascinating conclusion to this plot line because it is zero violence unless you consider violence to tradition, in which case this feels earth-shattering.
I think it makes me enjoy Rand a lot more because it isn't violence, and it's the kind of, the kind of institution that seems like it needs to be torn down, right?
Yeah.
Like, tradition for the sake of tradition never works for me in real life or in stories. So the fact that he's just like, nope, sorry, we're just gonna do things my way now, totally worked for me, and it made me just appreciate that he had to take kind of a big swing, and the fact he didn't do it with violence, although violence erupts. I liked, and I thought one of the other people was named Han, and the other one was something else. One of the other clan chiefs,
There was a Bale, there was a
Bale.
Moradin. Yeah.
I think that they kind of, because they weren't approving of what he did, but it was the way to actually clarify this. In other words, he did what he had to do to get them on his side, and I thought that was important and helpful.
Yeah, I really like the moment where Ruark kind of acknowledges what Rand has done. He basically says, like, this is too much. We think that there are many people who will not be able to handle this truth. And then he says that to Rand and like in the next breath declares him the Karakaran. It's that feeling of I can't fault you for doing it, but I hate you for doing it that I think really rang true with a couple of those clan chiefs responding to Rand here. And then, Lanfear shows up because it's the end of a book and Rand is featured. I thought the moment that was most interesting to me here, well, there were two things that came to mind. One is Rand basically insisting, I had you figured out, I set a trap, and then asking her like 8 clarifying questions was really funny to me. The other thing that I felt was I recognized here is I have been the dungeon master in a D&D campaign where I set up like a big double twist and my party never even catches on to the first half of the double twist. So I have to show up and be like, you were supposed to think this, but it was actually that. And my party's like, we never thought any of those things. That's kind of how I feel about Lanfear here. She's like, you might have caught my one trap, but I brought Asmodean with me. And Rand is like, really? Okay. It's just an out of nowhere twist that I don't know was set up well enough for me to feel like it landed. Was that your take as well?
Well, it's hard for me to. I guess I can judge it in terms of a first-time reader, and I think we thought those Tinkerer characters were suspicious in some ways, but I certainly didn't think it was too forsaken here, as within that. I think what is tricky for me is Lanfear is often painting it as, I did this to trick you, but to help you.
Yeah.
And at times it almost feels like they were working together the way it's expressed. But I think the correct reading, and I'm here asking this so you can correct me if I'm wrong, is that Rand understood she was there and so is ready to use her to advance his goals, but then, as you just asked, did not see this Asmodean piece.
Yeah.
And yet, as soon as it's revealed, he's like cool with it because he's like, yeah, I do need somebody to teach me how to channel. So it all kind of works out.
That is exactly correct. I think you are basically identifying what I would call the Princess Bride problem, which is that I'm pretty sure the end of this book is Lanfear is like, aha, but I did a thing knowing you'd do the thing. And Rand is like, yeah, but you did the thing knowing I do the thing, but I knew you'd do the thing. I think that's kind of the conclusion of this plot line is Rand didn't anticipate everything, but he had a plan that is able to adapt to the existence of Asmodean. And then Rand does a random thing that I don't understand. He makes a door to a black empty place. But then Lanfear responds to that with a very interesting question. She asks the question out loud, how much of the things from their past life do you remember? Right? She's wondering how much of this are you ad-libbing and how much of are you remembering? And I found that to be a really fascinating question to be asking at the end of this book. So in this chapter, and then we don't want to spoil too much, but in the next chapter, Rand does some stuff that he doesn't know what he's doing while he's doing it. What is your take on Lanfear asking the question, how much of this is you remembering?
Yeah, I would say this piece and then the first, action part of the next chapter is really it for me. It was hard to visualize. I mean, this is just a black door. It felt like we were suddenly going into Tron or something.
Yeah.
It felt really strange. I think I landed on this question as this is the old blood working through him. I don't think he remembers what he's doing, but there is language here that it's like something he used to do, right?
Yeah.
So I take it kind of like in this extreme situation, it's almost like muscle memory or, the mom lifting up the car with the adrenaline, where it's like she's out of, or he just is not in control of his actions, but something deeper within him is acting. Um, I don't think either particularly worked for me, but I found myself playing the game of like, is this the ways? Is this another dimension?
Yeah.
And I almost think, not to spoil the next chapter, that the answer is just you don't get to know yet, you don't care. Sorry, now I'm quoting our opening credits. You don't get to know that yet. And just be fine with it. Because it almost felt like Nynaeve going where she wanted to because she wanted to be there, right? That step. And just doing that but it's in the real world, not Tylor on Rhuidean.
Good pronunciation. Solid work. Yeah, I actually wanted to point to the girls because I think this chapter reminds me a bit of being in Egwene and Nynaeve's head in like the second or third book when they were channeling but didn't really know what they were doing, hadn't had a lot of formal training. And we picked up on earlier this book, Nynaeve and Egwene's kind of narration about channeling is now much more about like flows of spirit or flows of fire. And as I was reading this, I was wondering kind of now that Lanfear is saying like Rand, someone can teach you to channel, how much of this description would have been different if he had had a teacher? Because we've seen the girls change their description of channeling quite a bit since they arrived at the White Tower. I don't really have too much else to say here. This a fun chapter. What are your last thoughts on this before I give probably like a 20-minute long summary of the next chapter? Oh my God.
Just to say, because I don't think we emphasize it here, the fact that then the whole scene erupts in violence and Rand pieces out seems incredibly dangerous for Aiel, or sorry, not dangerous, but damaging for Aiel culture. That this is the place there's not supposed to be any fighting, the sacred place, and now it's all just erupted. So it was kind of it actually reminded me of The Hobbit, the book, where kind of Bilbo just falls asleep for a lot of the battles. And it's kind of like that, like, oh, start a battle and then disappear for a while. But how about you tell me about chapter 58, the Traps of Rhuidean, the last chapter of this book?
I know this is the last time I'll be summarizing things for a little while. It's difficult to do, but I'm going to do it. Chapter 58, The Traps of Rhuidean. Rand is in a void with steps that seem to appear underneath his feet as he runs. He runs onward, worrying that Asmodean has a head start, but then he sees Asmodean riding a silvery platform ahead, and he creates a platform from himself, although he knows that he doesn't know enough about this place yet to really be able to keep up. He sees that Asmodean is Jason Natale, and Rand is surprised that it wasn't Kader, but then Asmodean hurls walls of fire at Rand, who is barely able to destroy them with the power. Rand then counterattacks, but is thwarted by a shield that Asmodean creates, and then Asmodean opens a hole into the real world, and Rand struggles to try to hold it open, knowing that he won't be able to follow if he doesn't know where it goes. He leaps through the hole, and he is steps away from Rhuidean, the fog cloud, and he runs in trying to follow Asmodean. He throws lightning ahead of him, and then he has to dodge a trap. He actually ducks out of the way at the last moment. He could have been cut into many pieces. Rand then starts throwing lightning and fire, and he starts toppling a number of buildings as Asmodean climbs over them and continues his progress. Rand has to protect himself with a shield as Asmodean counterattacks, and he pursues through a large amount of rubble, and Asmodean eventually reaches a foot-tall statue of a man holding a crystal orb, but at the same time, so does Rand. They are both able to use the Terangriel, which allows them to touch the distant Sa-Angriel of the buried statue in Cairhien, and Rand draws more of the power than he thought was possible, but at the same time, he feels that the Dark One's taint and the madness grows as well. Rand and Asmodean then battle with immense power while trying to wrestle the Sa-Angriel from each other. There are earthquakes all around, and Rand worries that he is tiring, but he remembers the Angriel that is strapped to his belt, and while it is only a small amount of the power compared to the statue, it is enough. He uses it and strikes at the black cord that all of the Forsaken have, and Asmodean collapses as his cord is severed. Avendesora, the world tree, is aflame, and all of the palaces in the area have collapsed, and a chasm has opened in the city as an enormous amount of damage has been done by the earthquake that they created. Asmodean collapses to the ground and drops the statue, and he can only crawl towards Rand as Rand threatens him if he tries to do anything. At this point, Lanfear arrives, and I lost my place in my notes. She arrives and comments on a shield around the area they destroyed, and she says that that statue is the only one she knows of that is intact. She says she found one, but it was destroyed. She says it is one of two Sa-Angriel that she mentioned before, and she says that with both of them, they could overthrow the Dark One together. Asmodean then tells her, "You don't know what he has done to me," and Rand says that he has cut Asmodean off from the Dark One, which shocks Lanfear. Rand then says Asmodean is still the person who he was before he swore to the Dark, and so he should be given an opportunity to help the light, even if it is not willingly. And Rand says that he intends to use him as a teacher since he got the idea from Lanfear. He says that Asmodean will be taken as a traitor by the other Forsaken, and so he will be tied to Rand because none of them will trust Asmodean, and the only side that could potentially let him live will be Rand's. Asmodean then begs Lanfear not to tell the other Forsaken that he has turned against them, and Lanfear wonders aloud how much of Luz Theron Rand remembers, and then she eventually agrees to help Rand. She then puts a shield around Asmodean so that he can only channel a small amount, and says that it will slowly fade over the next few months, which should be long enough for Asmodean to be truly tied to him. Asmodean then begs Lanfear to not go through with this, and he refers to her as Mierin, which causes her to go into a rage, channeling and trying to hurt him and potentially kill him. At this point, Rand throws a bit of balefire between them, saving Asmodean and shocking Lanfear, and she asks if she should make her mark on him permanent, and then also thinks aloud whether or not he can be trusted with the statue that he has, but she eventually turns and leaves. At this point, first, Rand asks which one of the peddlers he was, and she says she was Kiel, and that Isendre has now been framed for a large amount of theft when she only did a small amount. Then she leaves. Rand thinks that she is Mierin, the woman who set free the Dark One, and wonders how she survived the explosion, whether she gave herself to the Dark One even in the beginning. And then Asmodean explains to him that now that he is cut off from the Dark One, he will go mad. But Rand says that there isn't anyone else who can teach him, and so even a mad teacher is the best he can get. Rand then briefly searches around the ruins of Rhuidean until he finds the female version of the statue. He considers destroying it, and Asmodean says that Lanfear will kill for it, but Rand says that she loves him, so she's not going to kill him. He then
notices that there is a lake forming at Rhuidean and realizes that people will now want to live here, that there isn't a dome of fog, and that there is actually livable area. Rand then opens another doorway, kind of vaguely remembering how to do it, and as they travel through the kind of formless void, Rand says that he will continue to call Asmodean Jason Natail, as any other name that he could take would potentially give him away. He also says the first thing that he wants him to teach is how to shield his dreams. At this point, Rand steps through into Alcair Dal, and he sees that about a quarter of the Aiel are no longer there. There is no longer any active fighting, and all of the other major players are there, including Moraine and others who had previously been barred from the area. Rand announces that someone should stop Isendre from being beaten, and Egwene seems stunned to the point that she is only talking in sentence fragments, and she is clearly very kind of concerned about the fact that the Gleeman has suddenly appeared with Rand. Rand wraps up both of the statues, but not before Moraine sees them and gives an odd look. And we learn that all of the Shido have left, and all of the others who remain acknowledge that Rand is the Kara Karn. But we also learn that men of nearly every one of the clans fled, and they will spread word of what Rand revealed, which will likely cause even more upheaval among the Aiel. Rhuarc is proud that none of the Tardad left, but he thinks that both Couladin and Savannah are likely a problem for another day, but will not go away quietly. Rand then looks out on all of the Aiel faces and notes how shaken they are and how they don't really seem kind of able to process what he revealed. And Rand says that it will be a long, bloody road ahead, but he begins, and that it will begin when the other clan chiefs arrive. Rhuarc says that it began long ago, but Rand thinks to himself he doesn't know where it will end. And then we end with an interesting prophecy, which I will read in its entirety because you haven't heard enough of my voice yet. And when the blood was sprinkled on the ground where nothing could grow, the children of the dragon did spring up, the people of the dragon, armed to dance with death. And he did call them forth from the wasted lands, and they did shake the world with battle from the Wheel of Time by Suleiman Abagad, chief historian of the Court of the Sun, the Fourth Age. And it's worth noting, the Fourth Age is the one after the one that we are currently reading about. That was a lot to say. It's your turn. Talk.
In like your third sentence, you said the dark one's taint, and I giggled for a really long time. That's the level of discourse I bring to this podcast, folks. What a crazy ending. So I already said the part at the beginning that feels like Tron didn't work for me, but once they got into Rhuidean, I was there, and I was there with it. And as I was reading those descriptions, I was thinking about what it reminded me of. And I had two movie comparisons that I was thinking of. First is the third Matrix movie. You
Okay.
reach a level where Neo and Agent Smith are just so powerful that inside of the Matrix in particular, they just start flying around and punching each other. And
They just stop being actors and start being pretty bad CGI.
yeah, exactly right. And it feels just crazy. They're like flying through the air, just slamming each other into buildings, and like giant things fall. But that's felt like to me the scale of what was going on here. I did not see the Zack Snyder Superman, but I think those are the complaints about the last fight in that movie.
Oh my God,
right?
all of the fights are terrible. But yes, that is a good description
Yeah.
of kind of the scope of the battle.
That I always hear the complaint that Superman's supposed to be like saving people, and they're just like knocking down buildings and not caring as they fight. And similarly, I actually was thinking a lot about the final Harry Potter movie. So that'd be the eighth Harry Potter movie. Because again, Voldemort and Harry, there's a sequence where they're flying around, and it's like they're apparating, dragging each other through the battle, and the battle's happening kind of around them with just widespread destruction. And I think that what those three things have in common, the book and those two, is that you are feeling a very intimate fight on a massive kind of reverberation scale where like city is falling apart, ancient magic is being deeply altered, but not because anybody's trying to do it, just because the powers of these two individuals.
Yeah, I think that the Perrin chapters in this book are the ones that I want to see on screen. And this chapter is one that I don't know how you do on screen, right? Like, if you're an actor who is acting out this action sequence, you are just wildly gesturing in front of a green screen and praying that the CGI team makes you look good, right? I think this could be really cool, but this is the kind of action sequence that terrifies me, right? When it's all magic, it feels like you lose a lot of the dynamic stuff. You've got to do what Harry Potter did and have people popping around everywhere so there's some movement in your otherwise throwing fire at each other battle. It could be cool, but this is the one I'm not sure I want to see on screen.
I always thought that about the Harry Potter movies. I think it's the fifth one, Voldemort and Dumbledore face off, and you're like, that's just two very good actors, like flinging sticks
Yeah.
at each other, and like you said, the CGI team. And then I always felt that for the Doctor Strange actors who had to do these really weird, intricate things with their hands, and then it's like, what on earth are they going to make of this later?
Yeah.
I don't understand, but it works. I mean, the magic
Yeah.
in that movie looks really cool as well, and in both. So, hey, but those aren't done on a TV budget, and I
Yeah.
love me some Doctor Who, but I would not try a fight like this on Doctor Who's budget.
Yeah.
Although now they get Disney Plus money, so maybe you could on that level.
I don't know whether or not Robert Jordan has Disney Plus money, but I don't have anything to say about the first third of this chapter. Things exploded. We run through Tron land. A tree is lit on fire. And then we find this really interesting statue that apparently ties us back to something that we have not seen since the first book of this series, right? This giant Saangriel in Cairhien that apparently this 1 foot tall statue links you to. And it feels like a big ol' MacGuffin to be dropping at the end of this book. Sometimes that can feel really rewarding, like I need to know what happens with this item next, and sometimes it can feel like Deus Ex Machina, right? Like I just horribly butchered that pronunciation, but we know what I'm talking about. Like that I feel like is the dilemma of the end of this book. It's a cool fight, but it's a fight that all rotates around a brand new object that I didn't know existed 5 minutes ago, and that can, I don't know. That's my hesitation about just embracing this as a truly great concluding chapter. Tell me I'm wrong to have that hesitation, or don't.
I really liked it. Well, and the other Harry Potter comparison there is the port key, right? That
Yeah.
this felt like that kind of experience as well. I could be wrong, but I feel like I clocked this statue in the descriptions when we previously came here.
That is correct.
Because I remembered that it was there, and then I could picture. I think at the time I said that sounds like the giant statue. So, look, Greg doesn't get a lot right, but there's a W for me. I kind of liked it, and it worked for me. I did just want to make sure I had my scales correctly. So we have Ter Angrial are the ones that the girls are chasing, and that Rand has under his belt.
Careful. Ter Angrial are things that can do magic stuff that don't enhance your channeling, right? So when the girls are chasing like the dream Ter Angrial or the Ter Angrial that makes balefire, right? Things that don't enhance your channeling but let you do something magical, that's a Ter Angrial. An Angriel is like what Rand has around his belt that lets you channel more of the power. A Saangriel is an exceptionally powerful Angriel. The weird thing about this statue is that the little statue is a Terangrial, the purpose of which is that it lets you use the big statue, which is a Saangriel. So it's really tricky because this thing is basically working like a Saangriel. It lets you channel more, but the way it's doing that is by linking you to the actual Saangriel halfway across the world.
And the gateways that were the test, that's a
Angriel, because they don't make you channel better. They let you do something else.
The one thing. Okay. Yeah. And then we had also had a hint somewhere. So in this, we know that there's a boy statue and a girl statue that each can use aligned with one side of the power. And we know the giant male statue is out in Carhane.
Yep.
we did have hints there's a giant female statue somewhere previously.
I believe the way that it had been described is 1, on the opposite end of the world, and 2, we had rumors that the sea folk knew about it, but I don't think we've gotten the specific location.
Cool. I just wanted to confirm that. And then again, the big secret at the end is that Rand has now taken the keys to using both of those.
Yes.
And Moraine knows his secret. He and Asmodean didn't really care about the female one because no man can use it. So they just bring it along so that nobody else has it. I mean, my Indiana Jones loving heart hates this fight because everything they destroy, I just kept shouting, like, it belongs in a museum. Like, there's so much we want to, as readers, learn about this world and experience. And they're just tearing it, like they're shattering it literally. And so much destruction happens. I did appreciate that Rand had that moment where he also voiced that kind of disappointment in himself. Like that it always ends in destruction and he doesn't like that.
Yeah, the moment where the Tree of Life is on fire, like, hurt me deep in my core. I don't know why I forgot that image, but now that it's back, it hurts slightly. I did want to just quickly note who knows what with the access keys is a term that we will be using to describe these items. It's worth noting Lanfear knows he has the male one, but not the female one. Moraine seems to know he has both. Asmodean also knows he has both and advocated for destroying the female access key. So I think that is just information that it's important to know who knows what, who has it. The other note that I had here is Lanfear makes very clear what she would do with this object. She would join Rand and destroy the Dark One so that she and he could replace the Dark One. And that is a new take on Lanfear we hadn't seen before.
Instead of a Dark Lord, you'll have a queen. I just wanted to shout that. Yes, that is interesting. And, you know, it still feels to me like Lanfear is the most chaotic of the Forsaken we've experienced. That she will switch sides. She's out for herself more than anything else. And it always makes me think that there are previous iterations of these events that she and Louis Theron did rule the world, and then this time around, she's not sure which way it will fall out. So it's always interesting.
Yeah, no, and I think that idea that Rand is reliving, right? He's the second coming of this story. While the Forsaken literally remember it because they were there. I think that contrast, something that's easy to get lost, but is really valuable here. I also just want to point out one of our most obscure prophecies. I'm pretty sure came true in this chapter. Min at one point gave a prophecy of Rand pouring water on the sand to make mud, and I'm pretty sure between the rain at Alcair Dal and the lake forming at Rhuidean, we actually got there eventually. I wanted to then talk about madness, because there is a couple of places in this chapter that make me very worried for Rand and those around him. Right? Rand is now being trained by Asmodean, who is no longer resistant to madness. And Rand notes very specifically that when he uses the Terangrial to access the Sangreal to channel an enormous amount of power, he feels the taint of the Dark One also growing proportionally. Greg is laughing right now. I need you to know that. That feels ominous to me, right?
Feeling the taint of the Dark Lord feels ominous to you. Are you trying to get us an explicit tag? My goodness. Yes, I think, well, and this is somewhat what I alluded to at the beginning. I think that the Dune movies walk us on that light side, dark side edge, whereas this, we're walking much more on the, I wouldn't even say sane, mad. I would say in control, out of control.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that particularly somebody who you remember I played a D&D character for a while who had wild magic. It feels like Rand is at the wild magic stage where it's like he kind of knows what he's going to do, but every once in a while some like unicorn will erupt from his hands instead or something like that. And I think, especially when we're talking about the quantity of power present in this confrontation, it just feels like that's more likely to cause the unicorn to pop out. Didn't I create a unicorn once by mistake in that campaign?
Sounds correct. Both me and my wife have recently played Baldur's Gate 3, and we both played Wild Magic Sorcerers, and just every once in a while you hear like, why am I a sheep? From the other room. And that is exactly where Rand is at, right? He can channel, he's very powerful, but he doesn't always get what he wants to get when he's channeling. And that's why I'm so fascinated by what it is going to look like with Rand having someone to teach him to channel, right? Rand has shown himself to be remarkably adept at politics and war, but the one thing he's kind of been flying by the seat of his pants on is channeling, right? He doesn't even know where Tronland is, and yet he is going there. This is the thing that I am kind of most anticipating at the end of this book is what does Rand look like knowing how to channel instead of fumbling his way through it? Do you have thoughts on how you think this is going to kind of play out for Rand? Do you see it going well? Do you see Asmodean being a good teacher? Do you see him betraying Rand very quickly? What are you thinking as we kind of lead into the next book with where this kind of cliffhanger gets left?
Yeah, I don't know that I can think of a comp immediately, but I'm very interested in the relationship between the two of them because it actually feels a little bit what they've been doing, spoiler alert, across the strands with Logain in the TV show. But you have somebody who understands Rand in a way that nobody else does, and is bound to him and seems to be stuck, but doesn't actually want to be teaching him. And I don't know, Last Jedi, Luke Skywalker comes to mind. Like that kind of begrudging mentor can be a fun figure. Actually, Hamish in the Hunger Games feels a little like that too. Like, so I'm interested to see their dynamic. And I'm not really, I don't want it to sound like I'm suspicious of Asmodean because he just seems totally resigned to it. He may not like this, but he's like, yeah, this is me now. This is all I can do because of Lanfear. And he got bested and this is what he's got. And so I'm interested to see that relationship. I'm still, I would not say, and this goes back to my opening comment, I'm not that worried about Rand. I still feel like Rand is just going to keep leveling up and becoming ready to take the world by storm, as it were, and save us all. But maybe I should be more worried. And I don't think you can answer that question.
Not even a little bit. I have one last thought on Asmodean Lanfear Rand, and that is a confirmation of something that we had suspected early on. Lanfear is Mierin, who we saw through the class columns, and that means that Lanfear was the first one to experience the Dark One as she set him free, and Rand wonders how did she survive? Maybe she gave herself to the Dark One immediately, and that is kind of a really interesting place if we're thinking of Lanfear as being both the most unpredictable and most likely to betray the Dark One Forsaken, and also potentially the first Dark Friend that existed. Is a really interesting kind of backstory for that character.
Co-signed. I'm interested, every time Lanfear comes on the page now, I think of our good friends who just are totally into her for the wrong reasons, and or maybe the right reasons. I mean, that's part of the character. But I'm interested to see more about her. I feel like she's been given so many snippets the last little while that I'm ready to have her be more present. Though I don't suspect we'll get that. I think she's a big part of this story moving forward, but I don't think she'll be like series regular next book or anything like that.
At this point, Rand returns to Alcair Dal, and things are different, and we've kind of talked about a lot of the characters and things that appear here. Do you have any last thoughts before we wrap this up? Because I think this might be our longest episode of the season. Which
yeah.
Good.
Yeah, I think this did. I was watching the time. It was like 90% your summary. It was good. I mean, you just have to land them. And I thought the thread of, yep, some clans are gone, but some clans are here. Like I said, I'm anticipating that turning into full-on civil war because, he didn't give the big speech that united the people of the dragon. And so I suspect maybe a book here in the Threefold Land with those struggles before we head back into the main continent with Rand. But I'm often quite wrong in my predictions. And Tylor will only say, I can confirm or deny. I cannot confirm or deny those thoughts.
Accurate. I can't do any of that. I just want to give a couple of thoughts on where we are going next before we wrap up. First off, next week we are going to be doing our usual end of book wrap up discussion. We'll talk about how we felt about the book overall, where it sits in our rankings. We'll make Greg feel silly if you can't remember the names of the POV characters. It'll be great. The week after, we are going to roll right into the Fires of Heaven. And if you're someone who doesn't want to read or doesn't want to listen to our end of book discussion, that's fine. Be aware that the first week of the Fires of Heaven, we will just be discussing the prologue. That is your reading for a couple of weeks from now. Honestly, I got Greg to read this, one of my favorite fantasy books, and so I am very happy. And I'm going to make you do our final outro. What did you think about this book overall? And then say the name of the podcast.
Find out what I thought of the book overall next week, because that is the only material I can possibly bring to that final show, because I don't have the names of angels to look up this time around. It's always a big milestone for us when we reach the end of a book because of our format and it feels so long. I mean, honestly, I think of what happened in our lives since January 1st, and we were just reading this book all the way through, right? I think you and I started just before the first of the year, but the episode started in the new year. So it's pretty incredible, and I am certainly enjoying this journey. And don't forget as well, Tylor just did some good housekeeping, but remember as well, I believe very soon after this episode drops, the first television episode is dropping in our feed. Those will not replace the reading episodes, but they will be alongside them. So as I forewarned you last week, a reminder, go steal a good Amazon password, ask a friend to go visit and borrow theirs. See if your mom and dad have Prime, and you can steal it from them. And we will talk book, show, everything else next time through the glass columns. So ends another episode of Through the Glass Columns. We thank you for joining us and continuing with us on our quest to cover all of the Wheel of Time in our own sweet time.
This podcast features original content developed by Tylor Orm and Greg Cass and is not in any way affiliated with, associated with, or condoned by the Robert Jordan Estate, Tor Fantasy, or Amazon. All content is intended for entertainment and educational purposes only.
If you're enjoying this podcast, please seek out the books from your local bookshop or library and join us as we continue our journey. If you'd like to contact us to share your thoughts or give feedback, you can email us at throughtheglasscolumns@gmail.com or find us on Instagram and Twitter by searching Through the Glass Columns.
Thank you once again for being part of this community. If you're enjoying the show, please subscribe to the show, leave us a review wherever you're listening, and recommend this show on your social media to help us grow our community. We look forward to welcoming you back next time through the Glass Columns.